Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining me for the first in our series of Work Search webinars. I'm Romaine Swanepoel, co-owner of RS Recruitment and Training. Today's webinar is all about how to deal with the anxiety and the stress that one experiences with a loss like job loss and loss of income. I'm going to help you understand the emotional phases that you go through, because when you understand something, you are better able to deal with it, recover, and then move forward. If you are at a stage where you are about to lose your job, or you have recently lost your job, I can really empathize with you because I have been there. This has happened to me a few times in my career. I understand the emotional roller coaster that you go through when you are in this kind of situation. The denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, and finally, thankfully, acceptance. When we experience a crisis or a loss like death, divorce, or job loss, most of us will go through some version of the traditional 5 stages of grief. Now, these stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, acceptance. The better you understand your thought processes during these phases, the better you will be able to deal with your emotions and the stress and move forward towards acceptance. The first emotion that you are bound to feel during a crisis like job loss is denial. You simply cannot believe that it's happening. On an emotional level, you are rejecting the fact to create a buffer to protect yourself against stronger emotions like anger, and so that you can continue functioning. Things that you might think or say during this phase is, I'm sure the employer will reconsider, or this might only be temporary, this is just a rumor or a mistake. Sooner or later, though, it will sink in that it is in fact really happening. And then it's quite natural for you to feel anger. You may feel this anger towards your employer, your co-workers, the economy, or even yourself. And people around you may find you getting temperamental and angry for no real apparent reason. And things that you might say or questions that you could ask at a time like this is, why me? It's not fair. How can this be happening to me? Or why would this happen? When you get to this stage, it's time to look for support. Surround yourself with family and friends who understand your challenge. Perhaps you can also seek counseling or guidance from a professional or from your religious leader. Be careful, though, that this guidance and counseling is productive and that you don't dwell, because dwelling for too long could hold you back. Once your outward anger subsides, it's time to move on to the next phase. The third phase involves the hope that you can avoid losing your job by bargaining with your former employer. Typical things that people might say at a time like this is, I'd give anything to be back. I'd work hard. I'd even take up the shift that I hated. Or, if only he'd give me my job back, I'd promise to stay focused and perform better. Or, maybe if I promised to work longer hours, they'd give me my job back. Like any of the 5 stages of grief, it's important to experience bargaining so that you can move past it. Beware, though, of being too hard on yourself at this point, because this can be damaging to your self-esteem and make you feel unnecessarily guilty. The next phase is depression and sadness. And thoughts that you might have at a time like this are, there is no meaning in working hard for an organization like this. There's nothing to look forward to. It'll really be tough to find something else, or I feel like giving up. Acknowledge your right to feel miserable. You're a human being, and when something bad happens, you have a right to be unhappy. Give your emotions space to exist. It's important to move through this phase, but it isn't pleasant. There are certain things, though, that you can do to help you through it. You will cope better with a stage of depression if once again you turn to your anchors for support. You can also keep your spirits uplifted and your confidence intact by thinking about all of the things that you accomplished and achieved during your working career, and make a list of these. Once you've made this list, choose the one that you're most proud of and write about it. You'll be surprised at how uplifting that can be and the positive impact that it can have on your self-confidence. Secondly, very importantly, is to have a daily routine. This gives you a sense of purpose and direction. Included in that routine should be an exercise program, because this is fantastic for relieving stress. Naturally, you should have a work search plan as well that you are implementing and making progress with. This makes you feel more in control, and that also helps to relieve the stress. In webinars 2, 3, and 4, we will give you many ideas that you can use as part of your work search strategy. Also included in your daily routine could be hobbies that you didn't have time for when you were working, and that's a nice reprieve. Finally, you need to take care of things financial, like, for example, having an emergency budget, and talk to your creditors. Tell them your situation and explain your circumstances, and come to some arrangement with them. You'll be amazed at how cooperative they can be. And taking that financial pressure off is hugely effective in reducing stress levels. And I speak from personal experience, because when COVID-19 hit and the lockdown happened, like most businesses around the world, we were very worried about the impact that it would have on our cash flow. So we spoke to our creditors, and they were amazing. 90% of them were cooperative and gave us assistance. It really is a worthwhile exercise. Finally, of course, there is acceptance, where you understand what happened, you've experienced it, and you're functioning through it. And as Michael J. Fox says, acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means understanding that something is what it is, and there's got to be a way through it. When you feel that you have reached the stage of acceptance, there's just one thing you need to be aware of, and that is that you are not forcing it. Sometimes when we want to be in a better emotional place, we try to rush the process before we are ready. You will know if you are genuinely over your job loss if you can talk about the experience with objectivity. You can state the facts without the emotional commentary, and you can also take ownership of and be accountable for your part in your job loss. You don't have to feel great about your job loss at this point. It still would have been a rotten experience, but a certain calmness sets in and you start to feel more in control. You realize that it's going to be okay, and you start to think about preparing for something new, maybe even something better. This is when the job search is really ready to begin, when you are in a good mental place to cope with the job market. To recap then, we all go through the 5 stages of grief when we experience a tragedy or a loss, like death, divorce, or job loss. And these phases are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. In order for you to accept your job loss, you need to go through these emotions and allow them to exist. We all go through the process at our own pace, and sometimes even in a different order. Occasionally, you may even regress back to a previous phase for a while. The better you understand these phases, the better you will be able to manage them and prevent yourself from getting stuck in any one phase for too long.